Well, I'm not going into that. I'm not going into that. We have two investigations, the Mueller report that we're all anxiously awaiting. Impeachment is a divisive issue in our country. And let us see what the facts are, what the law is, and what the behavior is of the president.
The media rolled out one of its favorite narratives this week, re-upping the Democrats in disarray meme after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi again shot down calls for Trump's impeachment after Michael Cohen's testimony. And again, after Joe Biden got backlash from some Democrats for calling Mike Pence a decent guy. Both incidents seem to feed the media narrative of turmoil within the Democratic Party. But is this Democrats in disarray or democracy in action in a party that still contains multiple points of view? Zerlina Maxwell is back with me, and now joining us, Jason Johnson of The Root, Teresa Kumar of Voto Latino, and political consultant Jimmy Williams. Thank you guys for being here. So let's talk about this. So the media meme this week, and I'll start with you on this, Jimmy, was the Democrats are in disarray because the liberal, the progressive wing of the party, the progressive freshmen, are coming after the moderates. There was a piece in the Washington Post that talked about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reportedly saying that Democrats who break ranks on the federal background check bill, this is a bill that's the first time in a long time they've passed a gun bill, would be placed on, quote, a list to be unseated by activists in the 2020 election. AOC clarified that on Twitter on Friday, saying the following: I didn't say they were putting themselves on a list for primaries. I did say that by Dems distinguishing themselves by breaking off on procedural MTR votes, they are inadvertently making a list of targets for the GOP and for progressive advocates on their pro-ICE vote. Is this a real fight, or is this the media just watching a party that has multiple points of view in it hash that out?
Well, let me just say this. It's clear that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has never actually been primaried. She's run a primary, and she's never had to run a re-elect. Because if she had, she would know that any procedural vote that you take in the House is actually a 30-second ad by the NRCC, the National Republican Campaign Committee. So that means that her colleagues, her fellow Democratic colleagues that may not be as liberal as her, who take those votes in swing districts in the suburbs of Virginia or upstate New York or Arizona or wherever that is, are going to be dinged by those votes if they don't vote their districts. So that being said, does it mean the Democrats are in disarray? No, it means the Democrats actually have a massive tent with lots of different voices from the center left to the far left. Fine, I got it. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is a freshman Democrat, either the House or the Senate, running around and saying they're going to primary their colleagues, who they sit on committees with, who they share or have office space next to, or what have you. It's really easy to demonize people that you don't want to I guess, like, because you don't get to know them. But if you do that to the other party, I get it. That's been around since the beginning of the country. But doing it to your fellow Democrats, to me, seems short-sighted, narrow-minded, and remarkably exactly what Donald Trump and his acolytes of white nationalists want us to do. So we're playing into their hands by doing this. I think it's foolish.
Well, so let's just talk about this for a second. Maria Teresa, we just talked in last block about the sort of undiluted fealty that the Republican Party now has to Donald Trump, where it's one chorus, it's one hand clapping. They're not allowed to deviate from him. They have to talk like him. They have to walk like him. Soon they'll be all wearing extra long ties like him and doing their hair like him at this point. But on the Democratic side, right? But on the Democratic side, there is more ideological diversity. It is the more diverse party ideologically, as well as in every other way that diversity means. However, there is a sense that what you just heard from Jimmy Williams is starting to sort of happen inside the party, in which they're getting annoyed at the leadership end, that there is this sense that the newcomers, that the progressives are attacking their own. The Washington Post had a piece that talked about liberals lashing out at moderates, and at closed-door sessions, a reportedly frustrated Speaker Pelosi lashed out at about 24 moderates and pressured them to get on board, saying we're either a team or we're not, and we have to make that decision. It sounds to me like the Speaker is trying to really hug the progressives tightly, bring them in the fold, and is telling the moderates not to publicly attack them.
Right. Well, let's not forget, Nancy Pelosi is from Northern California. I keep saying that this freshman class of the more progressive voice can very well be the class that she's been waiting for. They very much are aligned with her values, but she also understands that in order for the Democratic Party to be that party of a big tent, not everybody's going to be espousing the more liberal positions, and they have to give those individuals breathing room because no one knows their district better than the person that just ran it. I propose really examining Connor Lamb. Connor Lamb won his district as a veteran. He went against an individual that basically had won the district by over 20 points in favor of Donald Trump. And he was able to bring in the Democratic sensibility of a moderate Democrat to win that district almost by a landslide. So as they are talking about where are they going to land, it's important to have these debates in the Democratic Party. It's important to make sure that we are thinking big and audaciously, but it's also important for individual Democrats to understand that that they're going to be able to take the vote that they need in order to win that re-election.
Yeah, and Jason Johnson, this is kind of on the writ large end, if you want to zoom out. When you talk about this tension between the moderate wing of the Democratic Party and the progressive wing, nothing says that more than Bernie versus Hillary, okay? I mean, it's still there.
Yeah.
If you think it's over, tweet one of those two people's names and then watch your mentions light on fire, okay? So the reality is that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are actually both in Selma, Alabama, both at the commemoration of the Bloody Sunday March. Bernie Sanders got some shade from Hillary Clinton staffers who said, oh, you know, the king was flying around on private jets, and then you had Bernie Sanders go on The View and say he doesn't want any advice from Hillary Clinton, but they're now both have to be together and play kumbaya today. Does that dynamic in the party still wind up mattering with him in the race, her not in the race, and a lot of other people with his issues in the race, like the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, who had that issue, by the way, before? It's like she got it from him. I just want to make that point.
Right. Joy, I don't think so as much, and I think we saw that in the blue wave in 2018. I think a lot of people, now look, people who actually worked for the Clinton campaign, worked for the Sanders campaign, they've got the scars, they've got the war stories, and they may never trust each other, and that's completely legitimate. That happens in politics. But I think a lot of voters decided, look, Donald Trump and his Republican Party acolytes are so dangerous that we can get past this conflict. It's like mom and dad can keep arguing, but the kids still want to put Thanksgiving together. So I think a lot of Democrats have figured that out. But I will say this about this sort of Democrats in disarray, and I think this is key. I don't think the Democrats are in disarray, but I definitely think they need to do a better job of protecting their freshmen. I think what happened to Rashida Tlaib this week, I think what's happening to Congresswoman Oman, I think the leadership needs to come forward and defend these progressive newcomers because they're being attacked in a way that we haven't seen before, and they need more defense from the people who are supposed to be their colleagues in Congress.
You know, and that's a very good point, Zerlina, because I could go to you on the Hillary v. Bernie thing. Right. You worked in the campaigns. You feel free to chime in on that. But the freshmen are being targeted. Yes. The four, particularly Ayanna Pressley, AOC, like every day. Right. Yes. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. Those four, to hear the Republicans tell it, are co-presidents of the United States. They are the story every day, and they're being targeted in a way that Nancy Pelosi was too. Right. I wonder if part of her defense of them is also she's been there. Yeah. She was the boogie woman for years, from 2010 on, and now I think it sounds like what she's saying is we got to stop letting people attack our people.
Exactly, and they should stop letting people attack the four women of color, because it's not just that they're freshman congresswomen, it's not just that they're popular, it's that they're women of color. So they're easy targets, and they needed somebody new. I mean, attacking Nancy Pelosi was getting old, and it doesn't work. So I think the Republicans needed a new boogie woman, and now they have four to choose from. But to your point about sort of the divide in terms of the Democratic Party, I don't think the Democrats are in disarray, but Democrats are allowed to disagree on policy ideas. I mean, that's sort of what a primary is about, I thought. And in terms of the sort of residual impact of 2016, I don't have anything against Bernie Sanders. I think that my criticism of him and any other Democrat running in the race comes from a genuine place of trying to, encourage messaging that resonates with constituencies that those campaigns will need to win. Yeah. So if there's a criticism of Bernie Sanders that he doesn't reach out and actually provide messaging for black women, that is a valid critique because he's going to need that constituency to win. The same is true for Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand and all of the other candidates. And so I think that these disagreements are actually policy-based and not just personality-based.
And it's also, Jimmy Williams, it's also about how you actually functionally win a Democratic primary. Because there has been this question of whether or not Democrats need to vault over their hardcore base, which is mainly people of color and younger voters, and try to go right for Trump voters, even in a primary setting, and present themselves that way in a primary. That doesn't sound like it can work in a party that has become as diverse and really as progressive as the Democratic Party is. But I don't know, is there a stronger case that I'm thinking in my head for somebody like a Joe Biden who's trying to sort of run centrist from the jump?
Well, I think, first of all, in any primary, the first person to get more than 1% of the other person or the other people that you're running against, you win your primary. If you don't believe me, ask Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She did a remarkably good job at that. However, I would suggest to you in South Carolina, so take, for example, the first early state that's majority-minority. If you have 15 people running in the Democratic primary in South Carolina, I don't think we'll have that many by that time, but let's say you have 6 or 7 people. Divide 100% by 6 or 7, and you can come up with the number that you have to win. That means that the black vote, which is the majority-minority vote down here in South Carolina, is split out amongst 6 or 7 people. So you can't write off white Democrats in South Carolina. You cannot write off independents in South Carolina, which is a growing number of people because of the Trump fatigue that is actually happening on the ground down here. So I would suggest it's not just about putting together minority coalitions. You have to do that in Democratic primaries. Fact of life, just like you don't have to do that in Republican primaries, because you don't.
Right.
But you do have to not write off white voters in many of these states. You can't do that. If you do, you will not win in certain places.
Before we go,
Joy, just very briefly, when we talk a lot about the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party that was just elected, but what we fail to recognize is that the majority of the Democrats that came in actually come from moderate districts. This is the very first class where that we had a large group of veterans running as Democrats in the middle of the road of America. So it's really trying to cobble it together and recognizing that it's going to be, all elections are local, but when it comes to the presidential, it's going to be very local.
The Democrats have a bigger challenge because they are, at this point, a more broadly representative national party. And so they have to navigate that. Zerlina Maxwell, thank you very much. Jason, Maria, Teresa, and Jimmy will be back later in the show. And